If you're anything like me, you are well aware of your weaknesses and your shortcomings and your inadequacies and your gaps. You are fully aware of what you are equipped to do, and you probably have some labels or some stories that you tell in your head of what you're capable of doing. There's been several times when I've been put into a leadership position where it became glaringly obvious that I wasn't equipped yet to handle a particular circumstance. And therefore, everyone, including myself, but everyone else that was under my leadership had to suffer the consequences. There's some that it wasn't too big of a consequence. I remember at 19 years old, I was pushed into becoming a group fitness instructor. That was never a goal, that was never a dream. Found myself there, that's a long story. But I can remember specifically after teaching a class where there would be women staying afterwards that would come talk to me, assuming I was an expert in health, but also assuming that I had some sort of life experience or wisdom or knowledge that I did not have at 19. Women would talk to me about relational issues and divorce and how pursuing health was helping them, manage that. And they wanted to get my advice in regards to health and stress. And I felt super ill-equipped. That's actually what pushed me into the health and wellness world, because I knew I needed to learn more in order to be able to serve the people that were in my class better, that were looking to me for influence. I can tell you one specific story as a leader where I knew that my shortcomings, my limit was affecting the people that I was leading. So later down the road, after being a group fitness instructor for a long time, I had the opportunity to build a team from ground up. And part of building that team was training and developing the instructors and the skill set and creating a culture and delivering a service that was excellent every time. And I can remember one specific time, there was a group of us training to deliver a particular program, and we were practicing giving each other feedback. Well, of course, with me in the leadership role, my words, my reactions, my feedback are going to carry a different weight. Being young and fairly inexperienced as a leader, I'm watching some of these girls go through some of the programming, and there was one particular girl that was delivering this program, and the program needed to be delivered with precision and strength and athleticism in order to make the participants feel the same. And she didn't have that. She was a little sloppy and floppy. And being that I hadn't learned about really the impact of my words or how to think through that before I say things, I told her that. And I can't remember the specific words that I said, but it was something along the lines of, hey, the goal would be that we deliver this in such an elite athletic way that the people following us would also see themselves as athletes. And so when you're doing your high knee run, it doesn't look athletic. Of course, I did this in front of a group of peers, and I could tell her, the spirit in her just went, right? And we went into the locker room to practice in front of a mirror so I could give her some pointers to refine the movement. But I could tell moving forward that now I had a bigger problem to deal with. I was going to have to help her with her confidence and her belief and how she felt then on stage, how she saw herself amongst her peers, so on and so forth. I didn't have, at that point, feedback wrapped in empathy, and that was a massive limit in my leadership. I'm sure that you have faced particular circumstances like that, or bigger, maybe smaller, where you were facing, maybe unbeknownst to you initially, but it became evident that you had some limits. And that limit then affected the people that were under your influence as a leader. And that's what we're talking about here, is sometimes we know that we're inadequate and we've got to grow and learn. And sometimes we've got blind spots and we don't realize the limit that we are putting, the lid that we are putting on our organization, our teams, or even individuals, because leadership is really influence. And so when we lead people, even our own kids, right, whether it's an individual or a team, our own personal limitations will become a lid for the people that we are influencing, the people that we are leading. And so we can have the good intentions, the best intentions, but the impact of our limits has to be considered. The impact of our communication, of our training, of our feedback, of our team building, all of that, we have to look at that through the lens of knowing that we have to continue to grow in our capability and our capacity, because the effectiveness will come right underneath that. So if we're not growing, then this isn't growing. I'm sure you've heard of John Maxwell, and he has written a million books on leadership. But one of his early books was about these laws of leadership, and he talked about the law of the lid, which is exactly what I'm talking to you about and bringing in front of you right now. I'm sure if you're like me, you are aware of a few things that you've got some gaps in, but do you have an intentional growth plan for those places and those gaps? Do you have a growth plan that covers the blind spots? So some areas that I brainstormed and listed out, and these are just a few areas. There's many, many, many more areas, but a few of those would be conflict and how to approach and handle conflict, growing other leaders. How do you grow and empower and equip other leaders? How about habits that lead you in an intentional direction that you implement strategically and consistently for yourself, for your team, and also for your organization? How about creating processes and systems that have a measurement strategy? How about consistent action and ways of giving feedback to action and determining what needs tweaking? How about learning about communication and how to deliver certain things in order to motivate, inspire, or correct? How about personal health? Are you taking care of yourself? Because if your body is a limit, if your stress is a limit, that is going to affect the people that you influence. How about building a circle of feedback where it's not just you giving feedback, but you are receiving honest feedback for yourself? How about team building? How do you build a team? How do you build a culture? These are just a few things that I have noticed gaps in for myself in different periods of time over the last 20 years of leadership, that I've had to lay out a growth plan, bring on mentors and coaches, and learn from people who are role models and do this well. I've had to strategically and systematically lay out growth plans for me to learn and apply different principles in these areas. What about you? Do you, as I was listing those things, do you already know some specific areas that are a lid? You can be successful without personal growth. You might have the talent and skill set to take a group, a mission, reach some goals, and become successful in your first definition of that. At some point, you will have a limit. There's a story that John Maxwell tells of the original creators of McDonald's, started out as young guys, and they grew and developed and created a restaurant model that had systems that really stood out for their time, 1950s. But they tried to create a franchise model that really people didn't buy into, and they sold it to, I believe, 15 different people, but only 10 ended up starting. And so they struggled with the idea of, how do I create a duplicatable model? They had a leadership limit. They ended up selling to Ray Kroc down the road, who then, as you think of McDonald's and think of the brand and the franchise that it is, he's the one that developed that. He had a leadership capacity and capability that knew how to duplicate systems and duplicate other leaders to take on those systems and then grow and expand the brand. So a lot of us get focused on an outcome and think, I'm going to lay the path and the goals and the action that get us to an outcome. John Maxwell says, and I really like this, and it was something that I had to adopt, I'd probably say about 8 years ago, that goals helped me to do better, but growth helps me become better. The reality is we can grow, or we can get to a goal, but sustaining that and even growing from there is going to require growth, because you'll use everything that you're capable of to get you to the goal. But then after that, maintaining it or growing it from there is going to require your own growth. So I started the journey of not just outcome development, but who I become and the development of that. And I became more intentional about who I was becoming than what I was achieving. I had to adopt a different mindset of, instead of achieving to be happy, I had to happily achieve. And I struggled for a long time figuring out how to do that exactly. Being a dreamer and a doer, I struggled with my nature of see the goal, mission-minded, task-minded, get to the goal. And I had to learn to become not just mission-minded, but people-focused. How do I do that when that isn't my nature? My heart is people, but if I get set on a task or set on a path, I can easily lose or shut down on the empathy side. So over the last, like I said, 8 years, there's been intentional pathways toward growth that help me then to become a better leader. So some categories that I would look at if I were you, I listed some specific types of leadership skill sets, but some categories that I would look at would be your attitude, perspective, and beliefs. Because beliefs, meaning thoughts that we have that are conviction enough, they drive behavior and choices. So what we believe about success, what we believe about goal, what we believe about outcomes, all of those things, what we believe about who we are and strengths, and what we believe about our team, all of those beliefs will drive behavior. So addressing beliefs, perspectives, stories, and lenses, and having some ways, specific tools and strategies to address those and grow those, that's one category. Another category would be specific leadership skills. Several of the things that I had listed in the previous list would fall under this category: conflict resolution, communication styles, systems and processes. Developing strong relationships. So not just IQ, not just your smarts and your intelligence and your skills and your talents, but EQ. Understanding and being able to read what people are really saying when they're saying it. Understanding how people are motivated and demotivated. Understanding how they're wired and adjusting things so that it lands for them and actually helps them, doesn't just get stuff out of you. Developing trust and maintaining trust and safety in relationships, all of that is intentional. It doesn't just happen. That would be one area of growth as well. And then another one would be equipping others, duplicating yourself. How do you take an individual and help them grow as a leader? So those are just 4 categories. There are probably many more, but those are 4 big ones that as leaders, we have to be intentional about the growth path, not just the goal path. So what about you? Do you have people, resources, strategy, and consistent systems that help you to grow in the gap areas? Have you identified your gap areas? Sometimes it takes somebody outside of ourselves, because the blind spots, and we all have them, to help identify those things and help us to see outside of what we know and what's in front of our face in order to get us forward. My challenge to you is to identify a gap that is applicable to your current leadership and sphere of influence, and then step into the gap with mentorship, coaching, therapy, right? Use people and resources, and then plan out consistent action that helps you to become a better leader.